Welcome to Aspire, and I Have the Right To podcast, where we amplify voices, share stories, and drive change in the fight against sexual assault. We explore the critical issues surrounding student safety, institutional accountability, and survivor empowerment. In every episode, our goal is to provide insightful conversations with survivors, experts, educators, and advocates, giving you, our listener, valuable information, resources, and actionable steps to create safer environments and cultivate a culture of respect and consent. Welcome back to Aspire by I Have the Right To. I'm Katie Shipp, Executive Director of I Have the Right To.
And I'm Chessy Prout, co-founder of I Have the Right To. We're so excited to be here together as your co-hosts for today's episode.
Today, we're joined by an incredible guest from my alma mater, Meghan Boudreau. Meghan is a recent college graduate who has been a passionate voice for consent education and prevention work.
We wanted to have this conversation because so many of our listeners are either heading off to college soon, currently in school, or supporting young people as they make that transition. Meghan has such valuable insights to share, not only from her college experiences, but also about what comes next after graduation.
Meghan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
So to get us started, can you share a little bit about yourself and what you studied in college?
Absolutely. So like Katie said, I graduated recently from Allegheny College. I was a psychology major with a focus on legal psychology, and my minor was what we call community justice studies, which I like to say is political science without a lot of the science and theories behind it, more community-based advocacy. And there I specialized in teen and youth advocacy and mental health, specifically in urban populations.
That's amazing. And you spent a lot of time putting your senior comp or research project together. And the way we connected was that you actually had a very similar senior comp to what I did when I was at Allegheny many years ago. And we met when you were a tour guide for my nephew, and you were telling me about your research. And I said, oh my gosh, you have to get involved with I Have the Right To. So it was just such a beautiful connection that was not planned in any way.
Absolutely. That was just such a unique, like you said, a unique connection point. And my research specifically was studying psychological removal of children from home. So I'm very, very focused on the psychological impacts of traumatic situations. That's something I'm looking forward to continuing studying, which sounds so weird to say, but it is true. It is very true.
And so important. Can you share, before we dive into a bit more, can you share what you've been up to at I Have the Right To? Because you have been doing so much important work for us.
Yes, so lately I've been doing a lot of blog writing for I Have the Right To. My most recent blog that was published was regarding Lego and how we tend to kind of have gendered stereotypes within Lego toys and just toys in general. So the research that I did was kind of questioning, okay, how can we shift the focus so the toys themselves aren't so gender coded, perpetuating things like girls being homemakers, kind of like how the Barbie has Barbie dream home and everything, whereas guys and boys get more of the police officers, cool robot Legos. So figuring out how to break those gender stereotypes. I've also been working on other various projects, kind of in the background, helping other students edit work, and then working on learning more about restorative justice with Lucy. So that's been very cool.
And now I'm so curious, were you out of the womb born interested in this work, or were there certain moments in your life that kind of spurred your curiosity in learning more about community justice and, spurred your empathy towards children and people who have experienced trauma and how that affects the rest of their lives?
Yeah, so honestly, my life has been a series of I'm never going to study this specific field, and then that ends up being the exact field that I'm studying. So especially in high school, I was like, I don't see myself doing a lot of trauma-based research, but I see myself working in communities, and I'm such a hands-on person that I knew I wanted to work with other people specifically. Now, when it came to trauma research, a lot of that I honestly think was derived from my own healing process, that I knew that I had a great support system that not many other people did. So I wanted to be that support system for people one way or another throughout their healing process. Now, specifically working with kids and families, that's not a story that I specifically went through. I had a great family life growing up, and I think it was because I had such a strong family connection. I knew that it is very key to child's development. So that's kind of how I got more into the child and family pipeline, and an internship through the school that I did, where I worked with the child advocacy group CASA. And that really sparked a flame for me, and a love and a passion for advocating for children's rights and keeping the family units together when possible.
That's so amazing. And I would love for you to share with our listeners how you're going to continue doing this work, because you have such amazing plans to move forward and continue advocating and continue learning and sharing this sort of support with the world. So would you be able to share what you're up to right now and in the fall?
Absolutely. So I graduated a semester early from Allegheny, so in December of 2025. And then in spring of this year, I was able to work as a substitute teacher in my school district where I grew up. I served K through 12 and got to work with a lot of different groups of kids, which has been really eye-opening. I'll be moving very soon to attend NYU for the Master's in Social Work program, where I'm specializing again, hopefully in youth advocacy. I just got accepted to my practicum placement, actually, where I'll be working at an after-school program, making sure the needs of the kids are met to attend different kind of stations, from my understanding. So they have kind of creative classes that they are able to attend, things like bracelet making, dancing, just to have a creative outlet and be a support system for parents who can't pick up their kids right away after school. So I'm very excited about that, since my whole mission is a lot of resource distribution and figuring out how best to support kids and families through that resource distribution. So I'm excited to see how that continues in the future, as well as advocacy for care of social workers specifically is another line of research that I do. Not to go too much on a tangent with that, but kind of figuring out how to combine those two interests for sure.
So, Megan, you've had the opportunity to meet other interns at I Have the Right To this summer, which has been so great to just get, our interns to be able to meet each other. A lot of our interns are from different states, different schools, different ages. And as you know, a lot of them are high schoolers. Some are seniors, who just graduated and are going off to college. And so I wanted to chat with you a bit about college life and college experience for those high school students, whether they're juniors or seniors or recently graduated, and also for parents who are maybe listening as well. So can you take us back to your first few weeks of college? What was that transition like for you? And, what do you wish somebody would have told you before you started school?
Yeah, for sure. So I was very lucky from the start to the finish of my time at Allegheny specifically. Honestly, the first weeks of transitions were pretty straightforward and super amazing because of my roommate. Frankly, I got paired with a really amazing young woman, and we're still friends to this day. I grew up in a very sheltered home, and that is neither here nor there, and we had very different upbringings, but she was very much someone who was ready to go out and meet people and experience the world as soon as we got to college. So she really helped me get out of my shell in a lot of incredible ways. So transitioning from being kind of that sheltered kid in a protective home to now being encouraged to experience all these things that I probably wouldn't have done on my own. It really came down to her. So I have her to thank for getting me out of my shell, and then also honestly helping establish the friend group that we have today as well.
I was also blessed with an amazing college roommate that I was randomly paired with that I'm still close with today. And we were in each other's weddings, and we both have 2 kids now. And it's kind of crazy because we were just randomly paired together. And I think how lucky I was to have somebody so solid and stable and a true friend paired with me right from the start. Any advice on sort of how to build? It seems like you had such a great friend network on campus. Like, any advice to students? I know that's an anxiety for a lot of students of, okay, I'm going to be in a new place. I have to make new friends. Potentially they were at the school that they were at before for their whole academic experience before that. So any advice on sort of finding the right people and also being able to notice when some people maybe aren't the right people?
Yeah, it comes with a lot of trial and error. Frankly, that first week and that first semester was a lot of me trying to figure out who I was as an individual. So normally you would hear conversations like, be true to yourself, be who you are, be the most genuine version of you. But when you're in a situation like I was and I didn't know who I was, I think the biggest piece of advice is be willing to grow together. If we are not there supporting each other on a very personal level, then honestly, growth can be stunted in some ways. And we've had friends who come and go, and that's just natural with life, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, as long as you're willing to grow together, you're willing to struggle together, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people, but it is reality. There's beautiful, beautiful friendships that are forged as a result of that.
That's amazing and so great to hear as well. I remember going to college for the first time and being so uncertain and so unsure of myself. This was like maybe a couple months after my book was published, and I was added like a whole nother layer of anxiety to meeting people for the first time, where the ground felt uneven. They could know so much more about me than I know about them, but it is so important, I feel like, to find the people that let you figure out who you are, like you said. And I second that random roommate, or third that random roommate situation, because that's how I found one of my closest friends as well. But was there a moment during your first couple semesters, or even throughout your 4 years or 3.5, because you are amazing and you graduated a semester early, that shaped the way that you see campus life, like in a whole, above sort of like those individual friendships? Was there like a moment when you recognized the importance of having supports on campus, and the importance of advocacy outside of the institution?
I think the biggest thing was, learning how to advocate for situations we would see on campus life, whether it's people who were struggling also with relationship building, but even on a institutional level. All schools have issues. All schools need some sort of change to be made, or should have some sort of change be made. The beautiful thing about Allegheny is if there was a problem on campus, we had the room to advocate for that. And administration would change a lot of things to the degree that they were able to. I think that was something that really shaped the way that I was able to see campus life, was having a administration that would actually hear out a lot of what students said. There were times where that wouldn't be the case, but again, that's true with, I think, all institutions, especially coming out of COVID. I think in a general sense, that would be the way that shaped advocacy for me when it comes to institutional level.
And were there like any individuals that were super important to you as like a support system at school, besides friends and classmates? Like, I'm trying to think. I had a professor who was really, really amazing in a leadership course that I took, and was super supportive and kind and encouraging. Were there people like that on campus that were kind of pivotal in your experience at school? And also, how did you make those connections in the first place? Because it can be so daunting to find an adult on campus to kind of find a mentor. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, first and foremost, the first person I can think of is our advisor for Allegheny Christian Outreach, Molly Little. She is an incredible, incredible human being. She is someone who we call it mollying whenever she comes up and just approaches you, and she just has that air about her that you can talk to her about anything, and it's so true. So she was a huge role and, again, advisor in my life throughout Allegheny, and even now post graduation. She has helped with a lot of adjusting to school life, learning more about my faith walk on campus and off campus, and then additionally would be a lot of my professors in the psychology department. The amount of times I would attend office hours to talk either about test prep or even frankly just needed to talk about something, whether it's adjusting to school life, or I have two professors who I was really close with and I could honestly just talk to about anything. And we would talk about anything for hours, and it was great. And I think third, honestly, as I'm thinking about it, was in-school therapist that I had. She was the one that really helped me figure out who I was and who I am today, in that journey of healing that I had going into my first year. Unfortunately, she was no longer working after about my sophomore year, so after that was done, it was hard to keep in contact with her, but definitely Molly, the professors, and my counselor for sure.
It's such an important reminder that colleges have so many people, so many different groups, so many different resources. So if one group or one resource isn't working, like finding the people who are your people or the groups that are your groups. I got super involved with community service during my second year of college, and I think it shaped so much of who I am and what I chose to do. And I know that's always a big suggestion, and a piece of advice that I give people who are going into college is go do a ton of community service, because you can do service in any area, like any major or minor that you have, or anything that you think that you want to go do. There is volunteer opportunities for that, and you learn so much from volunteering and hands-on work. Even when I was at the firm and I was responsible for hiring associates, or here where I'm, responsible for hiring people, I love looking at that hands-on real world experience that people have, in community service is so important. And it sounds like you had that with CASA and potentially other places as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely echo what you said and agree what you said there, Katie, especially with CASA. And there were other nonprofits that I had the opportunity to work with and volunteer with. One of them was one that focused specifically on helping aid the housing crisis in the Meadville area, Common Roots. We got to do house demolition work and everything. So again, like you said, there's such niche areas that you can find opportunities to volunteer, and in those ways you can learn so much about the community you're serving in, as well as yourself and your identity in those spaces.
When I was at Allegheny, it was right after Katrina happened, and we were able to get the college to fund a bus for us. It was this small bus that wasn't very comfortable to drive us all the way down to New Orleans, and I learned how to hang drywall. And I still feel like that's one of the coolest things that I've done, that I can say I, hung drywall, because people don't expect that. So yeah, it can take you to a lot of different opportunities just by putting yourself out there. So as you know, the first few weeks of college are often called the red zone. So I want to, change our conversation a little bit and switch into a different topic. But the red zone is something that students really need to know about. It's the first 6 to 8 weeks of college where there's a much higher risk of sexual assaults, and most sexual assaults that will occur that whole year of college, really a majority of them occur during that time period. So I was just wondering, were you aware of what the red zone was, during the beginning of your freshman year, and your experience at your college, but also friends of yours that maybe went to other colleges as well? Like, what do you think the general knowledge of freshmen were at that time, right? About what red zone was, and what resources, were available to them, and what they needed to know to support themselves and their peers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually had no idea about the red zone until I joined I Have the Right To, and I wrote a draft for a blog regarding that. I had it made so much sense when I learned about it. And it's something that I wish I knew sooner. And I hope that more people are aware of sooner, because I think once we bring awareness to the red zone, it'll help protect so many people, and also be able to prevent a lot more problems like assault from happening early on in the college career. So yeah, that it's unfortunate that I didn't know it sooner, and I really hope that we can use this as a chance for people to get to know what it is.
Yeah, and the term itself is so important to know, but more importantly, I feel like even if you don't know the term, as long as you stay aware and rooted in, what you feel like is the correct amount of support and care for your friends, you are already making a difference in the first few months of school. So if you were talking to a student who is entering their first semester of college, what advice would you give to them about staying supportive and safe and looking out for their friends and calling out behaviors, or how they can be, effective bystanders and upstanders? Yeah, any advice you'd have for, a student entering their first semester, maybe not sure who they are, or figuring out what their morals and values are in relation to, being independent for the first time ever.
Yeah, I definitely advise people to be alert. Just be aware not only of your surroundings, but the people you are surrounding yourself with. I, again, had the very fortunate opportunity of surrounding myself with really fantastic people pretty early on. And we really did have each other's backs when it came to a lot of stressful situations. And there were moments early in the school year, especially, where we had some pretty intense stuff happen, not just among us, but people we knew. And the reality is that we were there for each other. So when you have a strong support system and group of friends, it makes it a lot easier. For those who might be struggling to find friends or make friends, still just have that awareness around you about the way people might interact in certain situations, and don't be afraid to get help. That was the biggest thing that I learned, is not fearing talking to an adult about a serious problem. A lot of schools will have policies like the Good Samaritan policy, where if someone's in danger, or, is using drugs, or are drinking to a point of endangering themselves or others, you can report that. And you should report that, especially when it's a danger to yourself or others around you. So, and that takes a lot of courage. That honestly, especially going into the first year, I know I didn't have, and I wouldn't have had if it wasn't for the people around me. But you got to be brave. You really do.
When you're starting your first semester of college, it's so intense. Like, I remember so many different presentations, and you were trying to figure out, where do I buy my books, and where do I live, and where do I go to eat, and just everything. So even schools that do the right thing and they have workshops maybe on consent and healthy relationships and Title IX early on, it's often thrown in with all the other stuff happening during freshman orientation that, it's like a blip on the radar. So I always talk about, and I have the right to, we really advocate for parents to talk to their children before they go off to college, but also high school seniors, having things available for high school seniors to really start to think about it before they go off to college. And I was just wondering, how do you think that would help young people, both the high schools having programming on it, but also maybe even the high schools providing opportunities for parents to learn how to have those conversations with kids over the summer before they go away to college?
Yeah, I think especially in theory, it would be so important to have those conversations before college. I know that when I got to Allegheny, just like you said, especially the assault conversation was a play that they did early on. And it was something that was just, it was interesting because I don't remember the content of the play. I was healing from my own situation, and I remember going to the bathroom because it was just such an onset of information and like very real situations that had set me off. And I remember having this moment of solidarity with a lot of other women in that bathroom because we were all sobbing, trying to figure out how to recenter ourselves when we knew this conversation was going to happen, but we didn't know the way it was delivered. And it was just a very challenging transition and overwhelming because, like you said, it's the middle of orientation. We have all this information, this new space, and suddenly, bam, there's a play going on about some of our worst moments, and it was hard to watch. It was hard to experience. So I think entering that space in theory with the conversation already being had is vital. It really is. In practice, I think it really depends on the school and the situation and the students themselves. I think it's very important for parents to be able to have this conversation with their kids and not just have it be a school assembly. And at the same time, I know there's parents who are just not ready to have that tool equipped for them. So I think there is a lot to be said about the workshops that I Have the Right To does, because it is a beautiful way to allow not just parents, but students to have these spaces that are safe for conversation, not just a play that they have to sit and watch and then not be able to have a sustained dialogue about, but also administration and faculty among teachers. Like, these conversations need to be had no matter how uncomfortable they are, because they are reality. And I do think that it's important for seniors, specifically in high school, to have those tools equipped. And honestly, a few seniors might have already had those experiences. So how do we then have this as a conversation for those who are survivors by their senior year of high school? How do we have these conversations for those who may never experience this but can be advocates? And honestly, the programs that I Have the Right To do are incredible for that kind of equipping.
That's why I'm especially proud of the work that I Have the Right To has done over the last couple of years and the way that we approach different schools and places that we go to. It's a holistic approach. We like to talk to the kids, talk to the parents, and talk to the teachers, because, we all have to be on the same page about messaging, also creating comfort so that there can be these crossed conversations, because we need to be talking to our parents about this. Our parents need to be talking to us about this. My parents thought that they only had to worry about my older sister, who was a senior in high school about to go to college, and little did they know that I was, being assaulted that very weekend, that they were going to talk to my sister about it. So I think it's the way that, you kind of laid it out there with the jump from high school to college, and that feels like such a huge jump. It feels like a very steep set of stairs, and I think we've got to create a ramp. We've got to create a ramp of education and openness that starts so small, so easy, so unoffensive, so basic, and which is why, our mission statement as an organization is that safety starts with respect. So teaching respect from, the moment a child can speak or walk or interact with the world, I think would make it so much easier to gradually get to these conversations, because unfortunately, we are, like you said, at hazard of becoming victims or experiencing sexual assault the second we step foot on the earth. So it most likely will happen before the age of 18 for at least, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. So from your perspective, as a human being, as a young woman, as a kindergarten, first grade, elementary, middle school, high school, now college graduate, and then entering your master's program, what can these institutions and schools do better during each period? What do you think would have served you at, you don't have to go grade by grade, but at each age, what do you feel like would have been helpful and appropriate to set you up for success and to set you up to feel safe and empowered when we're put in situations by people whose actions are really hurtful?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as much as it is as important as it is for me as a survivor to have had those tools equipped from K through whatever grade, even into later adulthood, I think information too for people who are likely to be perpetrators of these actions is equally, if not more important. So we can do that in a holistic way, starting even in preschool when you're teaching kids, okay, you share the toys. You don't always get what you want. And if a child is playing with this toy, it's okay for them to play with that toy. You can go do something else, just using toys as an example, not comparing toys to humans, but just a very tangible example. And then when you go into middle school, kind of teaching, okay, how do you respect one another on the playground? We are not punching one another. I say this as a very explicit example because it has happened multiple times at the grades that I taught. You're not punching each other. You're not kicking each other off the playground equipment. You are sharing that space as well. Again, that level of respect, Chessy, that you mentioned from that young of an age. And then we do junior high school in my district. Not everybody does it, but at junior high, you can really start to have those conversations about bodily autonomy, about sex, because frankly, at that age, hormones are crazy. The kids know what's going on. So it's important to have, again, not just if you are assaulted, this is what you should do, but this is frankly how not to be in positions as a likely perpetrator where you will assault someone, just to put it very frankly, as tough as it is to hear. So again, I'm a behavioral psychologist advocate. I love behavioral psychology, and that's the reinforcement, the belief that we naturally reinforce a lot of behaviors, and reinforced behaviors then become pattern behaviors, and so on and so forth. So when we reinforce in a younger age that sharing is caring, respect others and do unto others as you would do to yourself, it really teaches us that we are just people trying to figure out our ways in the world, and that we are trying to share this space. We are trying to share these lives. So the basic human thing to do is to show respect and to show care, and to do that in a physical and relational way as well, if that makes sense.
As you were talking about that, it reminded me of the important work that you're doing with Lucy this summer on restorative justice, because I also firmly believe that we have to have conversations about consent and body safety in healthy relationships centered around safety and respect at a very young age. But as my son he just finished elementary school, he's going into what we call in our district intermediate school. I've also found the need of young people also need to learn about restorative practices. So if you cause harm, if you're the kid who maybe pushed the other kid on the playground, but you feel bad about it and you still want to be friends with them, how can you heal that relationship, right? And giving them the tools when they're young so that they have the tools when they're older as well. Because I think that we don't, even as adults, so many adults I know, we don't have the tools to heal things when things get tough. And I've spoken about this on other episodes, but my son was having a hard time with another kid, and the first option that was given to me was to separate them at school. And I thought, they're in second grade. They're going to be in, several more years of school together. Separating is not the issue. They need to, talk and work things out. And so I think restorative practices are often thought of incorporating them into the criminal system or other systems, but let's incorporate them into elementary school education. So I was just wondering, with your work with Lucy, in the workshop you guys are developing, and maybe you can even talk a little bit about, Lucy's work and what you guys have been working on, but and also just the importance of having that be part of the conversation too.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to restorative justice and the work I'm doing with Lucy specifically, we're still kind of in the early phases. I had not really heard the term. I took a class that talked about it, but made it more of an applied practice than it was that I knew the definition. So it was one of those terms that I was like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And then we really started diving into it this summer, and I was like, okay, so I had no clue what that was. Yeah, so especially Katie, I loved what you said about having it be in early childhood education settings and developmental settings. I know in the practicum placement I was in, I was like beaming because in the interview she mentioned restorative justice. So I was very excited because there are districts starting to apply that model in these educational settings, which is so beautiful. And it's just like you said, that if we have restorative justice, which is like the mediation between a perpetrator and a victim, in these spaces, again, it could be something like playground, you get pushed, the perpetrator is the child doing the pushing, the victim is the child who fell, and the mediator could be someone like a teacher. How can we have these conversations and these dialogues to teach these social, emotional skills that are so needed and then can be used in the future? Because I think we, not to go off on too much of a tangent, are such an individualistic culture to a point where we have our struggles be our struggles. And when it comes to that, it's hard to talk to the perpetrator. It really is at times. But then what healing is there when you're sitting in that stagnant trauma? And of course, in reality, there's some times where you can't communicate with the perpetrator and you have a different road of healing. It's not a one-size-fits-all option, but I definitely think it will work as a very, very helpful intervention tool and preventative measure for a beautiful, like, new generation to come if this is something that's used.
And I think it could prevent future harm, right? If we teach them when they're younger how to heal and how to become better, then the hope is that then they don't grow up to do things that are much bigger, and the restorative justice approach might not be the approach that is the right approach at that point. It was interesting with my experiences, because my reaction was no, like I don't want to separate them. I want them to talk. The teacher that I was speaking to, the principal, she actually said she seemed relieved, and then she had all of these restorative justice focused ideas. She said, oh, let's have them sit down at lunch together, and let's have one of our counselors sit with them and help them talk. And I think the reason why she first introduced it is because a lot of parents are not in that place yet. And so I think that that's why there also needs to be education for the parents and the educators, because sometimes the kids might totally get it, but the parents don't get it, and so that's one of the reasons why we think it's so important to talk with each part of the population, because let's be real, like usually it's younger generations that really create change historically. And so getting like the adults up to speed on what the young people maybe already are learning or already know. So just a side thought on all of that, and just the importance with speaking to the adults in the room as well.
Absolutely. And I think this might be a bit of an overgeneralization, but we are such a non-confrontational generation that when, like, I wasn't raised in this mediation skills. I was raised in, like, there's the concept of I care language. Like, that hurt my feelings. But then there was never that, okay, so what do you do if somebody is like, I don't care about that, So I really have a lot of hope in the upcoming generation that there are these conversations being had, that we're learning it's okay to sit in discomfort, and it's important to sit in discomfort, because not everything is going to be sunshine, rainbows, work out perfectly. But what can we do to meet that happy medium and still smile when the rain is coming down?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to lose the defensiveness that I feel like is bred into us, especially set an example by the criminal legal system of innocent until proven guilty, which of course is necessary for a system, whatever. But I think that it's also incentivizes people to lie and deny and just hope that they can convince, people that they're right. Whereas I think we would be much better off by recognizing, yeah, I did something wrong, and, I will take the steps to fix it. And I think defensiveness is something that we really need to work on as a culture. And I feel like college might be the place where we can really explore that. I wonder what you think about that as well, just because, there's so much more room for diverse opinions from different high schools, different states, different countries to come together in one classroom and really talk about concepts, ideas, and listen to each other. I think in a lot of seminar classes, especially being able to sit and disagree with each other but not hate each other is a really special thing about, the college experience. Is that something that you see? Like, where do you see these interventions happening naturally in your experience?
Yeah, so I think, especially at the college level, I know there were some, looking back as we're talking about this, there were some moments that even in my friend group, we had kind of a natural conversation whenever there was conflict that arose in a restorative justice kind of way. So I think there are times when that ability to have these conversations does kind of just naturally happen, and that's wonderful. I think, again, in spaces like classrooms, it can be a little bit more challenging at the college level because whereas you have in grade school these teachers who you see every day and everyone's in the same class, kind of, at least that's how my school was formatted, then you kind of have that structured time that you're like, okay, after school you can come talk to me and your friends and we can mediate. At the college level, there's a little bit more advocacy work you have to do on your end to make those conversations happen, I believe. Again, it depends on the college, it depends on the teachers, all of that kind of stuff. But when you're at that level and at that grade, you do have to start learning that self-sufficiency skill of, okay, I'm having a problem on this level. Who can I talk to or what resource can I reach out to kind of help mediate it? So I know like the Title IX department is a place where a lot of these conversations can and are had. Counseling offices, honestly, even getting a professor involved, going back to that idea of a trusted adult or advisor that you can talk to that's a third party outside of these, outside of the situation itself to work as a mediator.
Yeah, and I think I look back on certain professors that I feel like really empowered us to use our voices, like those discussion-based classrooms. I remember I ended up minoring in religious studies at Allegheny, and it was because of a professor that I had. It was this really interesting class. There was probably 15 students in the class, all from different cultures, faith backgrounds, and the way he did it encouraged everybody to speak, and everybody was so respectful of each other. And it was like a moment in my life that shifted things for me and the way that I viewed things, and the way that college professors and other people you're interacting with on campus can sort of open those doors for you and different ways of thinking about it. So if you were going to sit down with a group of high school seniors and you were going to give them one piece of advice for this transitional period from high school to college, or at this point, a senior or a student who just graduated and is, potentially a couple weeks away from going to college and living in the dorms, what's that piece of advice that you would want them to know?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice I can give is it's okay to not know what you're doing as long as you're willing to learn. I know that, especially in high school, I thought I had all the answers. I knew exactly what I was going to major in. I knew exactly what I was not going to do, and that was going to be it. I knew I would never do social work. I knew I would never, I wasn't going to graduate early because I wanted the full years of experiences. Like, these are all things I knew, quote unquote. The reality is you don't know because life throws so many different curveballs, and that's okay. What matters is, are you willing to adapt?
I also went to college thinking that I was going to go to med school. And obviously, that is not what I did. I took a chem class and thought, oh my gosh, I hate this, and completely changed my plans. So, yeah, I think the committing to being flexible and being willing to change your mind on things is 100% such a good piece of advice.
And thinking about that flexibility too, I feel like that flexibility needs to be allowed or acceptable in your social life as well. I was wondering, in your experience, and I know I experienced this, too, in my first couple of years of college or months, the pressure to fit in, especially when it comes to drinking or social scenes or partying. Like sometimes it feels like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. I'm not going out enough. I'm not making enough friends. I'm not taking enough classes. I'm not doing enough in clubs. How do you deal with those feelings? And how do you attack that as an individual who's just trying their best? Do you have any advice for students who might, enter school and feel that way?
Yeah, so I'm going to be so real. I'm still figuring that out. I'm what me and my friends like to call a functioning workaholic. So if I'm not doing everything, then I'm not doing enough. And that's something, especially going into my master's, that I'm trying to unlearn how to do. And the reality is we can't do everything. The way that it was best described to me is like you have to picture yourself in this circle. And this circle is everything that you're able to do. There's going to be a time when you fill that circle up and you are just going to have so much extra stuff that you're going to be so overwhelmed. So what do you want to prioritize in that circle? For me, I had to recognize two things. One, my friends were super important to me, of course, and that's very top priority. Additionally, I was paying to go to school and be an academic. So I knew that academics was a huge thing for me, and I couldn't pay to go to school if I wasn't working. So I knew I had to work. And so those were the top three, I would say, important things. My faith was also like within the friend group, within social identity. And that was like first and foremost, as I mentioned earlier. But it's so easy to go outside of that circle. So the biggest thing is you cannot let yourself be your biggest bully, because you will be your biggest bully. The little voice in your head is going to tell you you could take on those extra projects. You could take on that extra job. You could take on XYZ. The reality is you are one person. And again, if you have an amazing support system, that makes life a lot easier. So find those people who will be real with you, who will call you out when you're doing too much. And I thank my friends so much because I was doing too much. And so that ability to be called out and to have the humility to let yourself be called out was another thing that helped a lot. Now, when it comes to drinking, social scenes, party scenes, all that kind of stuff, it is okay to have fun. You are learning to grow, but also know that you, again, are one person. Be safe, make good choices, find those accountability buddies, and learn as you go.
I had a therapist tell me one time, because I also struggle with taking too much on, because I just, want to do all of the things. And she said to me, imagine you have a bowl full of marbles and there's only so many marbles in the bowl. And like, you have to give out your marbles to each of the things that you're doing. And then you have no marbles left. So like, it's finite. Like there's only so much that you have. And so I always go back to that and think of that as, okay, if I'm putting 3 here and 2 here, then I have only this many left. And it always sort of helped me to have that visual aid. So you talked about the importance of friendships and having accountability partners in your life, which is so important at all ages. What's one thing that students can do to be a good friend or an active bystander if they see something that doesn't feel right? Because that's something that we really encourage at I Have the Right To, is paying attention to what's going on around you and having the skills to step up when that's needed, and the different ways that you could step up. So any advice for students on that?
Yeah, I genuinely think that it's better to advocate for the needs of others rather than under advocate. So there are times where I would report something and it would frustrate some people that things would get reported, but at the end of the day, the person, I'm thinking of one situation in particular, but after that situation was reported and the person was able to get help, it ended up being a necessary step to be taken. And so don't be afraid to report things. I also am trying to learn that balance of like, okay, what is something that needs to be reported? What's something that maybe I could talk to the person first, make sure that they're okay first and foremost, like they're getting help, that I'm not overstepping by trying to get someone involved who doesn't need to at that point in time. So yeah, just being aware of your surroundings, as I mentioned earlier. Know what you can handle too, because it is important to be a bystander, an active bystander, and not let things like bystander effect take place, which is when, you see something go on and you assume that someone else is going to take care of it and then nobody does. That's what bystander effect is. And so, not letting that happen, but also understands that if there's a situation that you are not equipped to handle at all, then that is okay too. You can find someone who is, or yeah, that's the biggest thing, is find someone who is better equipped, because especially when you get to know people on campus, whether it's administration, staff, or even other friends, statistically, you're going to find someone who will be able to help with those instances. So if you can't handle it, someone else will, but be the person to go get that person.
Yeah, that ties in nicely to our marble conversation too. If it's too many marbles in one basket, like you've got to take care of yourself first. But it is so important to stand up for others at the same time. So finding those adults or people who have more information or of the wherewithal to deal with these problems is a really great tip. And speaking of doing a lot, what after meeting Katie, after chatting more with her, what led to your decision to get more involved with I Have the Right To?
So genuinely meeting Katie was something that the timing was just so beautiful, and the opportunities that I Have the Right To has presented me between my love for research. I've been able to do a lot of blogging that is research focused, and then also honestly the programs that I Have the Right To has to offer, as I mentioned earlier, it was so unique to what I've seen other sexual assault advocacy groups doing, in the sense that it really, the organization is so victim focused and victim centered, and at the same time it's holistic. So what I mean by that is you guys really do a great job of focusing on the needs of the victim. How can we make sure resources are in place for those who have experienced assault? And at the same time, how can we stop perpetuating the cycles? What conversations can we have on administration, student, and even personal levels to ensure that students are being safe, are safe in general? And how can we have these open dialogues? And so that's something I've really loved about I Have the Right To, and continue to love, is that advocacy level and the ability to do it in a communal way.
I just have been constantly impressed by you, Megan, in everything you've done with us. Your voice and the voice of our interns and the other young people and survivors that we work with, it really is central and informs everything that we do, because you can't make a change unless you're listening to the people who've been through it, right? And I think that sometimes that gets lost, like even today in the media, right? Like we talk about, for example, Epstein, but are we listening to the survivors? Are we listening to the people who have been through it? Because they're the ones that know best. And I think that that's what we keep coming back to, is really centering survivors, their voices, and also listening to young people about what they think they need to hear and how their peers need to hear it to actually effectuate change. So we're so thankful for you to give, as we said before, some of your marbles, put some of your marbles in our basket, because we really are appreciative of that. And so, how do you see students shaping the future of consent education and prevention work? Obviously, you are so active, other advocates. How do you see, the young people shaping what it's going to look like?
Honestly, I've been so humbled by our high school interns. They are so on fire for what they do here. And that has just been so encouraging to see, and uplifting for myself. Just seeing the work that people are doing, the language that is being used among our interns is so mature and so just, again, relieving that we are having these uncomfortable conversations, frankly, at such a young age, but still being able to, I say such a young age, but you know what I mean. But we're able to do so in a safe space, in a protected space, and be able to brainstorm with one another on how we can even have these conversations take place at a younger age. So again, like seeing these restorative justice practices actually being discussed and implemented to some degree in schools, it really gives me hope. So I'm very excited to see what the next generations are like when it comes to consent and safety, because I think there's a lot of beautiful and powerful strides being made.
That's amazing. And beyond students and student advocacy, what gives you hope about campus culture? We talk so much about creating a culture of consent versus rape culture. And is there anything that you see on the campus that you were teaching at this past semester that gives you hope for the status of our consent culture?
Yeah, I think there still is a lot of work that needs to be done on our campus cultures, both at the collegiate level and in grade schools. But again, I think a lot of that work is going to come from the advocacy of students. And because students are, at least I'm kind of biased because I'm in this place where people are very great at their advocacy. But I think there are going to be a lot more advocates that are starting to come up, and a lot more students and even administration that's starting to recognize that what is happening on campus culture right now is not okay. And the fact that we're able to recognize things like the red zone, that is also so powerful and important. So I think, again, having these conversations are important. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but I do see a lot of change happening moving forward.
I agree. I definitely see a lot of work that needs to be done, but I also have a lot of hope. So the last question we like to ask our guests is how you would complete the phrase, I have the right to, and what that means to you.
Yeah, so I would complete the phrase as I have the right to advocate for myself and others. And that is in a general scope as well as sexual assault advocacy. I think it's so important to be a voice both for yourself at an individual level and for the community members you surround yourself with. And that can be done in so many ways, whether it's research, podcasting, film, media, any of that. There's so many places where we can advocate for the needs of those around us. And the second we're able to advocate for each other and stand up for one another is the second our communities become stronger as well.
100%. Meghan, thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights, and your heart with us today. I know so many listeners will walk away feeling more prepared, more seen, and more hopeful because of what you've shared.
Truly, your honesty and passion are exactly the kind of energy that sparks real change on campuses and in communities. We're so grateful for your voice and for the work you're continuing to do.
To all our listeners, whether you're about to start college, already on campus, or supporting someone who is, remember that you're not alone. There are resources, people, and communities like I Have the Right To that are here for you.
And we believe that every student deserves to feel safe, respected, and empowered on campus and beyond. Keep asking questions, keep showing up for each other, and keep using your voice.
Thanks again for tuning in to Aspire. If today's conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to share it, leave us a review, or follow us for future episodes. Until next time, take care, look out for one another, and never forget, you have the right to feel safe, to be heard, and to thrive. Thank you so much for listening. Like and subscribe to the podcast on all platforms. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends about Aspire, the I Have the Right To podcast. Visit IHaveTheRightTo.org to learn more about our programming for students, educators, and parents, as well as internship opportunities. And don't forget to follow us on social media at I Have the Right To. Until next time, stay empowered and keep the conversations going.